Well, hello, citizens of Everett and those that are very interested in our budget. Thank you for tuning in to our City of Everett budget meeting for 2025. If you're tuning in now, this will be approximately 58 minutes or so. And then it's actually part one. And then if you would look into our council meeting after this, we'll be basically doing maybe part two of many. So we appreciate everyone's time, and I think we'll get started. So I'll begin with the city administration's update.
I'll just turn it right on over to our finance team here to share a brief-ish, but important, but brief-ish presentation. And then after that, we hopefully will have plenty of time to hear from all the council members on your questions and thoughts. So.
Okay, and I would also just give you a heads up too. We probably have a lot of questions today. You may or may not have all the information, but I hope you're ready to compile a list. Because I know ideally we'd like to email them in advance so you're prepared for some of the items, but that doesn't necessarily always happen. So if you could compile a list, that'd be fantastic.
We are definitely ready to do that. And this is a great environment to share those questions too. So.
Great, thank you.
Right. Good evening, City Council. Heidi Berlantes, Finance Director. Joining me today is Jamie Lee Graves, our Assistant Finance Director. Tonight is the first of 3 planned budget hearings on the 25 proposed operating budget. In this meeting, we will provide an overview of the citywide revenue and expenditure budget. During tonight's council meeting, we will highlight the key changes in the 2025 general government expenditure budget. These changes will be addressed in more detail on a fund-by-fund basis during the briefing scheduled later this evening. Department directors will be available to answer questions you may have regarding their specific areas. In our second budget hearing scheduled for November 13th, we will focus on the highlights of the 2025 non-general government expenditure changes, ensuring that we cover the full scope of the proposed budget. As a reminder, the non-general government funds, such as enterprise funds, are more like independent businesses. These revenues cannot be used to subsidize the general government's operations. By separating the briefings by 1 week, we hope to continue to remind the community that these non-general government funds are different than general government operations. Finally, the third hearing will be held on November 20th, and this will allow us to finalize any outstanding discussions. We anticipate that a vote on the budget will take place at the City Council meeting scheduled for December 4th. I do want to thank Councilmember Ryan, Taylor, and Bader for providing your initial questions prior to today. Both your questions will be answered during regular council meeting briefing. Tonight is a time to solicit council feedback and input. I can likely respond to some technical questions, but really intend to listen and follow up next week on input, feedback, and questions that may require some more time and research. I know that some, if not all, council members have had the opportunity to work with Mike Bailey, who is very well respected amongst municipalities and finance teams across the state and likely other states. Some of your questions or requests for information may relate to longtime practices or policies, those that have been in place for many years, some farther back than even the early 2000s. But in my new role, I am looking forward to rolling up my sleeves with the mayor and all of you to review new ideas. Before we dive into the specifics, I'd like to take a moment to also clarify the basis for the budget comparisons in tonight's briefing. As in previous years, we are presenting the difference between the 2024 original budget and the 2025 proposed budget. We use the original budget as the basis rather than the amended because the amended budget often includes substantial reappropriations, which can skew the year-over-year comparison. These adjustments can make it more difficult to identify the true changes in spending and revenue between the 2 years. Please note that any expenditure changes made mid-year in 2024 that will continue into 2025 have been incorporated into the proposed budget. These adjustments will be reflected as increases, ensuring that we are accounting for these ongoing commitments as we move forward. With that context in mind, we can now proceed to the overview of citywide revenue. The citywide revenue budget includes both general government and non-general government funds, such as the enterprise funds. And these are classified under 7 major categories, each of which plays a critical role in supporting our city's operations and services. The classifications of these revenues are based on the GAAP Budgeting, Accounting, and Reporting System, or BARS manual, which is a standardized framework for local governments in Washington state. This is also maintained by the State Auditor's Office. The BARS manual ensures that accounting and financial reporting are consistent and uniform across all governments, all local governments across the state that report under generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. I'll now briefly walk you through each of the revenue categories and the percentage they represent of the total citywide revenue budget. First on the left is fines and penalties, which make up less than 1% of citywide revenues. This category includes revenues from traffic and non-traffic infractions, parking fees, penalty assessments, and code violations. Charges for goods and services make up 31% of citywide revenues. This category includes fees that the city charges for various services, such as utilities, transit fares, golf green fees, plan check fees, ambulance transports, traffic mitigation, and internal cost allocations when one department charges another for services rendered. Other financing sources make up 31% of the citywide revenues too. This category includes operating transfers, payment in lieu of taxes, bond proceeds, and capital contributions. Moving to the right, licenses and permits make up 1% of citywide revenues. This category includes business licenses, cable franchise fees, construction and development permits, and various other permits. Miscellaneous revenues make up 2%. This category includes interest earnings, rents and leases, donations, insurance recoveries, surplus proceeds, and custodial activities that are related to pensions. Intergovernmental revenues make up 7% of citywide revenues. This category includes grants received from local, state, and federal governments, state-shared revenues and entitlements, the Ground Emergency Medical Transport, or GEMT reimbursements, and the Medicare D subsidy. Lastly, taxes make up 20% of citywide revenues. Taxes represent a crucial portion of our revenue, encompassing property taxes, sales and use tax, business and occupation, or B&O taxes, and other taxes. This is a broad category that supports many of the city's essential services. The 25 proposed citywide revenue for both general government and non-general government funds is $610 million. The increase from the 24 original budget is due primarily to a water and sewer bond issue that is planned for the first half of next year. This also includes a modest contribution from growth in charges for services and taxes. The bar chart on the slide breaks down the total revenue by category, with the revenue split between general government, depicted in blue, and non-general government, depicted in peach. As a reminder, the general government budget funds core city services such as police, fire, parks, and the library. Taxes are the primary revenue source for the general government. Conversely, non-general government funds, including our water and sewer utilities, Everett Transit, and the golf courses, are funded primarily through rates, fees, and grants. These non-general government funds, like I've mentioned, are considered like independent businesses, and the revenues cannot be used to subsidize the general government's operations. This is important to keep in mind when we talk about addressing any budget deficits within the general government. We cannot legally transfer revenues from non-general government funds, such as our utilities, transit, and golf courses, the private businesses, if you will, to pay for general government services that is not earned. On a citywide basis, charges for goods and services is the largest revenue category at $190.3 million. Water, sewer, and solid waste utilities account for $117 million, or 62% of this category. Other financing sources is the second largest category. There is a noticeable $150 million increase from the 24 original budget, and that is for the planned water and sewer bond issue next year, which will help fund essential capital projects, primarily in the water and sewer utility infrastructure. Taxes is the third largest revenue category on a citywide basis, but the largest revenue source for the general government, accounting for 71% of its total revenues. The largest component of taxes is sales tax. Transit and the general government are the two main recipients of those sales tax. Now we turn our attention to the 25 proposed citywide expenditure budget, which has been shaped by 5 key priorities. These priorities reflect the core goals and values that guide our budgeting process and are essential in ensuring the city continues to meet the needs of our residents. The 5 key priorities are housing, transportation, and infrastructure, safe community, responsive and responsible government, economic, workforce, and cultural vitality, and engaged and informed community. The budget document is designed to be a communication tool aimed at providing transparency and accountability in how tax dollars are allocated. It's not just about numbers, it's about showing how and why the city invests in its residents, services, and future. To make this clear, the budget document focuses on how the work of each department supports these broader priorities. This emphasizes the interconnectedness of city operations and how they all contribute to the broader goals we are aiming to achieve. This slide lists the departments under their largest priority category. Each department's activities are aligned with one or more of these priorities, ensuring that our resources are focused where they will have the most meaningful impact. For example, the water, sewer, and solid waste utilities fall under the housing, transportation, and infrastructure priority, while our municipal court, legal, police, fire, and emergency medical services departments are aligned with the safe community priority. The 25 proposed citywide expenditure budget totals $644.1 million. This slide presents how that budget is distributed across the city's 5 key priorities. As with the revenue breakdown, the expenditures are categorized into general government, depicted in blue, and non-general government, depicted in peach. Housing, transportation, and infrastructure priority accounts for most of the city's total expenditures at $367.1 million. Included in this category is the regional water and sewer utility, which serves over 600,000 people for water services and over 160,000 people for sewer services. This far exceeds Everett's population. This makes infrastructure and utility services a critical area for investment, as they serve not just the city, but a larger regional population. The second largest priority, safe community, totals $140.1 million. This priority encompasses funding for municipal court, legal, law enforcement, fire services, emergency medical services, and other safety-related programs. However, when we look at general government expenditures alone, the safe community priority rises to the top, accounting for $103 million, or 59% of the total general government budget. The responsible and responsive priority is third at $77.5 million and includes resources for the administrative functions of the city. This includes governance, public accountability, and fiscal responsibility. This area also covers investments in technology, transparency, and services that directly support the day-to-day functions of city operations. The economic, workforce, and cultural vitality priority at $50.6 million supports programs aimed at promoting economic development and the cultural and recreational vibrancy of Everett. Investments here help attract businesses, create job opportunities, and support the arts, culture, and community events. Lastly, at $8.8 million, the engaged and informed community includes investments in public outreach, community engagement, and ensuring that residents have access to information and resources. As mentioned, we will be presenting the highlights of the 25 general government expenditure changes during tonight's council meeting. To introduce this area, we'd like to first start with how the general government expenditures are funded. The 25 proposed general government revenues is $169 million. This chart shows the proportionate share of all general government revenues, with individual taxes broken out in the bar on the right. As you can see, there are a variety of revenues that support the city's core public services. However, taxes are by far the largest source. Within the taxes category, the biggest contributors are property tax, sales tax, B&O tax, and utility taxes, such as those paid for telephone, cable, and garbage. The aerospace industry is a major driver of B&O tax revenues in cities like Everett, particularly through large manufacturers like Boeing and a network of supporting industries. However, as we've seen in the past, this industry is highly sensitive to various external factors. This includes labor disputes and market fluctuations. A labor strike in the aerospace sector can significantly affect the local economy and in turn city revenues, especially B&O taxes. This warrants close monitoring in the current and upcoming year, although I am happy to hear that Boeing is back to work. This slide may be helpful to understand the growth in full-time equivalents, or FTEs, over time. It provides a detailed comparison of general government FTEs between the 2015 original budget and the 25 proposed budget, broken down by department. The total FTEs in the 2015 original budget was 718.98 FTEs and 727.16 in the 25 proposed budget. Although some departments have seen more significant changes between 2015 and 25 than others, the overall net increase to general government FTEs over the 10-year period is 8.18 FTEs. Over the past decade, some departments have undergone reorganization to better align with the city's priorities and improve operational efficiency. As Everett has grown and the needs of its residents have evolved, other departments had to scale up staffing to meet demand and respond to emerging issues. Prime examples include the growing needs in public safety, maintaining and expanding infrastructure such as roads, increased demand for permit services, and challenges related to affordable housing and homelessness. Internal support departments have also needed to grow due to increased reporting and compliance requirements and even cybersecurity demands. While the increase of 8.18 FTEs is modest, it reflects a strategic adjustment rather than a significant expansion of city government. The city has made thoughtful investments in its workforce to ensure it can meet the challenges of a growing city while maintaining efficiency. In addition, it's important to note that 27.35 FTEs in the 25 proposed budget are funded by grants or other external sources. While revenue limitations present a challenge for the general government, particularly in terms of supporting staffing and expanding services to meet community needs, the city has been proactive in identifying funding opportunities such as grants to address these challenges. This slide provides perspective on how the city's staffing levels have changed relative to population growth. While the population has increased by more than 10,000 people between 2015 and 2025, the number of general government FTEs per 1,000 residents has actually declined. In 2015, the city had 6.8 FTEs per 1,000 residents. In the 25 proposed budget, this ratio has decreased to 6.27 FTEs per 1,000 residents. That does conclude our presentation for the Budget and Finance Committee part of the public hearing, but I'd now like to open up further discussion.
I know we have a lot of questions about all parts of the budget. So I'd like to start off from our council members. If there's something specific to this information here presented, could we start there and then go on to others? Yes, Councilmember Tui.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi, for that. I do have a question going back to the slide just previous about the FTEs that are being funded by grants. So my concern with that is, what is our plan for the future for those positions? And is it projects that we won't go forward with when the grant funding ends? Or are we going to have to try to fit this into a future budget, say next year or the year after?
Correct. Thank you for your question, Councilmember Tui. Yes, any grant-funded positions are considered limited term. So we do track the period of performance of the grants beginning and end dates. And on an annual basis during the budget development process, we look to that list to see which positions we would need to reduce, or is it still an existing community need where it would still need to be included in the budget.
Okay, so just curious if we can ever have a briefing on that. I'd just be kind of curious to know what kinds of positions are funded by grants, and 'cause that's something that I'm not too aware of, but I think it would be really helpful information.
Okay. In summary, we do have officers that are funded by the COPS grant.
Right.
So that's about 10 and a half FTEs for 2025. There are still 2 positions that are supported by the COVID relief funds because they hadn't been used in previous years, so they've been reappropriated or carried forward into the budget. We also have a federal SAMHSA grant that is supporting most, if not all, the community support team. And we also have a community outreach coordinator, which was shared in Budget Amendment Number 2. That's part of the Parks and Community Services Department. And that is funded by a federal inflation reduction grant, and that's for tree planting. And then we also have external sources that are supporting our public veterinary program. So those are positions that we would evaluate on an ongoing basis based on any funding that's there to support them.
Thank you. I know I sent you a question about the COPS grant and the timing on all that, so I'll look forward to those details. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so if we could just start off with, once again, this material here. Go ahead, Councilmember Zarlingo.
Well, related to that question, I guess it strikes me that grants are something that come and go, but there are kind of a constant flow of them of one sort or another. So any perspective you can offer with future information about, is there a kind of a normal level of that sort of thing? Because if each individual grant is obviously time limited or dollar limited, but if there are ongoing flows like that, it'd be nice to know the magnitude of those. And are we in a period where we're doing more with grants, or are we in a period where we're doing less, or is this kind of a normal run rate of that? It doesn't it doesn't alleviate the need for us to track that, but it'd be nice to know what's normal.
Okay. I have a couple of questions here for this material. It's okay. So here on this, I guess it's page 12, under Fund 032, I noticed that there is 20 position change. Is that due to a transfer to 153? Those positions?
Yes, that's correct. That
Okay.
started in 2019.
All right, so we call that a special services fund. What do we, special revenue?
Emergency
fund?
Medical Services Fund.
But it's under what subject? We have like a main heading, like one.
EMS, Emergency Medical
I got
Services.
that part, but is it a special services or enterprise fund or revenue?
It's a special revenue fund.
Special revenue, that's the word I was looking
Okay.
for, okay. Are there any of these other positions that have been diverted to an ongoing fund? I know that one, that's why I said it, but how about some of these other positions? Are
Not-
they funded by a special revenue fund? I know it's unique with the 153 fund. And of course, we've increased the revenue there. So is there any of these other positions that are funded in some other place other than grants?
So the common practice is that special revenue funds would be used more for grant control, grant accountability. So that's where the grant revenues are reported. But we actually budget for the labor in the general government departments. So the support that's provided by those grants is actually a transfer from a non-general government fund into general government operations. But do you remember when I said that the general government can't, or non-general government funds cannot subsidize the general government operations unless earned. So there is job costing to track the time that is spent on grants so that we're not taking more than what was earned. What's unique about the Emergency Medical Service Fund is that in 2019, that was specifically created because of the state's ground emergency medical transport reimbursement program. But we also added aid cars, which increased EMS staff. So we do get reimbursed from the state for those labor costs.
Thank you. So I have another question. Is there a proposed to reduce parking enforcement, full-time employees? Is it reflective here in this? Or,
It would be reflected here, but there's also a component to that in the presentation at the regular council meeting that would go in further detail,
okay.
if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. And I have one last question. I'll pass it on here. Why 10 years on your projections? You started here 2015, why'd you choose 10 years?
I could pick any other year, but we just thought a 10-year span would be beneficial to see, although the population has increased by 10,000 in the last 10 years, really our FTEs have not. But I can look at any other given year and trend that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Fosse.
I want to preface this with, I'm not assuming anything, I'm just trying to understand the data just a little bit, so I don't think that there's anything weird or wrong with this. I'm just trying to make sense of it in my head. On the general government FTE history, I see that, like, legal, for instance, it says that the change has been 1 FTE. But when we were working with our consultant, they said that legal has increased in the last 4 years in the budgets by 45%.
I think part of that is not due to FTEs, but due to our increased indigent defense costs, because indigent defense is part of the legal budget.
Okay. Okay.
We also provide further detail on that on a fund-by-fund basis in the regular council meeting tonight. So hopefully that will bring some clarity to
Okay.
the increase in cost.
Would you also be tackling the information about the administration? Because it shows a decrease in FTEs, but then the cost of it was also, from our consultant, showing an increase.
I'll take a look at that specifically and see if there's anything that can be added.
And you don't have to, yeah,
6:30.
you can get back to us later. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So once again, we'll stick to this data first, and then we'll have more. Thank you. So Councilmember Mobley.
Sticking to what was said just today, at the very beginning, you said that the directors will be available for questions. And is that the two of the directors that we see here tonight, or for all of the departments like library and public works and whatnot?
Not all, but most directors that are, fund managers for the general government departments will be here. If they aren't present, then we'll make sure to relay those questions.
Okay. And I did want to, while looking at general government FTE history, going from 2015 to 2025 is really neat. What I've noticed over the past years of looking at every budget FTE history is that the departments often change, and some weren't even around in 2015 as they are today. And so it's quite fluid, if you will. So while this is very interesting, I would look at it deeper for my colleagues. Thank you.
Is that something you want them to focus on, like a question that you can work on?
No, I want everybody else to.
To know that's going
'cause-
on?
Yeah.
Okay. So have we covered any questions about what's presented? The next step, I'd like to maybe start working on other questions. So, Councilman Ryan?
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. I think, there's so much that has happened between 2015 and next year that it's kind of it's difficult to see a snapshot in time and another snapshot in time and not the continuity all the way across. So it's a little bit difficult to kind of zhush out, but I think one thing that would be helpful is kind of to Councilmember Vogel's point as well, like which of these funds and departments the FTE has shifted because one fund absorbed another fund's FTEs. So I know there's been some consolidations and whatnot, which I think is a great way to have government efficiency, but I think it might show it would take out of context like why there is like a significant amount of growth for one certain department, but it's because another department was eliminated or absorbed into a new department. So I think that would be helpful for these different snapshots in time, that it's not always that one department just exploded with FTEs, it's that it was consolidated with another department for efficiency purposes. So just, that'd be helpful in the future. Thanks.
Great. Councilman Bader.
Just a quick comment, in response to a comment you made, Council President Schwab, but I was trying to avoid watching the Seahawks the other day, and so I charted out FTEs on my own, and really, you could have chosen 2014 or 2016 or whatever, and I think it would have been similar trends, at least from the data
Right.
that I looked at, so, anyhow, in terms of that
No,
question.
thank you for that. I was
Yeah.
just wondering what their motivation was.
Yeah.
Because 10
Understood.
years is a good line. Okay, well, we have more. Councilmember Judy Tui.
It's
Judy
not a
Dewey.
question, I just, before we start, just open questions about the budget, if we could know what questions other council members have already submitted, so that we don't ask the same question, would be nice to, if we can,
It's a great idea. Thank you for that.
and I'll share my questions if you want, or.
Yep, sure, let's
So
start.
mine was on public safety, and I asked questions about the 3.5 officers that will be reduced, a description of their workload and what will happen to the others without them. I asked about the COPS grant, kind of getting an update of the timing on that, when it ends, how much we've used, and then I asked for a review, more detail on the jail fees with some statistics on the number of arrests and jail fees over the last 3 years. And then I asked a question about the traffic safety cameras with the ending balance of 1.4 million, if we had any planned projects. So I sent those in today, and so those will be coming. So that's all.
Thank you. I'll just go down the line here then, if you want to share, Councilman Bader.
Sure. Questions I brought to Heidi were the FTE trends, just wanting to get some background, because like, for instance, IT was a good example of one. We know the world is changing there, so I knew there was some interesting information to share there. A similar question around looking at revenues over the last 10, 11 years, but much of that the revenue trends match the FTE trends pretty closely, so I think some of the same rationale applies there. So those were the questions I had submitted. So, thanks.
Thank you. These could be new also.
Great. Yeah,
Thank
my questions that I had previously submitted were about how furlough savings were calculated. I didn't have clarity on how a reduction in FTE equates to the salary savings. So just how that is calculated, I think, would be helpful. And I have a whole bunch more questions, as evidenced by my little tabbies here. I'd be happy to go through them later. They're nothing really substantial.
Actually, I'd like to hear them. Are you going to submit them? It'd be good if I could take
I
some-
mean, it's more for a fund-by-fund
Okay, that's fine
basis,
then.
but it's mostly things like, how much is that gonna cost? Are we taking this into
Okay.
account? Just
Great. Are you
those
planning on
types of
submitting them
I
to
was,
admin?
I was probably just gonna ask them later tonight, but I could type them up in the meantime if it's
Oh, yeah,
helpful.
so it's okay. I just wondered if there's something that we could all learn from what you ask. So, okay. Councilmember Zarlingo.
Well, I've engaged with a couple of other council members in some of the questions that have already been brought up. I've come up with some other things, but I need to consolidate those a little bit, and we'll submit those in writing.
All right, it is my turn.
It is.
I have not submitted any questions.
Okay.
However, there are a couple that are just technical and that you might be able to answer right now. Page 2-7, so chapter 2. Curious, why are some of the revenue fund numbers underlined? I think it's technical. And so depending on that answer, why isn't Fund 114 underlined? Is that a typo or is that on purpose?
No, so the general government is composed of Department 001 through 038. There are some special revenue funds. They were created that way, but they're truly not, like from an accounting standpoint, true special revenue funds, which is why they are consolidated with general government operations. So that would include Parks and Community Services, 101, Municipal Arts, 112, the Conference Center, 114, and Streets and Street Improvements, 119 and 120.
Yeah, those are not, so,
Ones that are under-
I'm just, it's purely technical, because I just don't know, so I don't think that it's funny business. But like 101, okay, so Parks and Community Services, the Library Fund, Municipal Arts, down 126, Motor Vehicle Equipment, Cumulative Reserve for Real Property, Property Management. But you had also, you know, you mentioned some other ones that, I don't know, they're just underlined. I don't know why, so.
I'll share
Okay.
something.
Thanks. And then 217, and it's a box of numbers. And what is, and now I've even forgotten like the whole word, is that in millions or thousands? Financial Policies Reserved Fund 126 through 638, all a bunch of different numbers, there's like 14 of them. So like, I looked in a previous year's budget book, and it was in the thousands, but I couldn't believe that motor vehicle and equipment replacement estimated balance was $3,340. So, but it doesn't say in the table, like, what that should be in. So, again, technical, maybe even typo, which I love to do.
Yeah, that should be in the table. I believe that it must have been cut off where we put that it's referenced
Okay.
in millions. My apologies.
So if it is $3,340, what would it really be?
It is in the thousand. So if I'm looking at CIP 2, for example, that would be like $14 million.
So add another 3 zeros? Okay, thanks. And then Fund 171, yeah, is not new this year, but I think it's new from 2022. And then I noticed that we're not planning on utilizing any of that money, and I'm curious if that fund goes with the ILA with the county for 1590 and/or the 1406 revenue funds that we're getting. Could you explain Fund
Yeah.
171, please?
Sorry, I think my mic's broken. So
Yeah.
yes, that fund was created when a new sales tax was implemented. It's the Affordable and Supportive Housing Sales Tax. And it is a true special revenue fund and needs to, essentially, any time we are spending those resources, we'll have to come to council to share, what we're using it on, ensuring that it follows the restrictions. So there's currently nothing in there planned for spend. Let me just double check
Is there
on
a
that
spend
one.
plan? It looked like
Oh,
that.
thank you for all the thanks.
And maybe
Let
I'm
me
just
double
looking at the
check.
wrong section because I've only gotten to section 3 and not like 6 or 8.
Yes, and so for the most part, except for in 2023, we did have costs in there, and then there was a little bit that was left over from what was budgeted in '23, but there's nothing planned for '25. So if there was anything, that would have to come through a budget amendment.
Okay. That's all I have right now. Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. It could be for future if they don't have the information today. It's great.
Working?
One of the things that had been brought up was that you guys had made 12 million in reductions. Did you guys specify where those 12 million that you're specifically referring to was made?
Yeah, so we look at every revenue source of the general government, and then we evaluate labor and the M&O cost for each of those funds. So the changes are actually pretty extensive, and we do offer a summary of the balancing measures in every annual budget book. However, that has always been presented in the final budget book, and it's not incorporated into this proposed book. However, I can provide you with that summary that we would plan on producing for the final budget.
Yeah.
And that would give you the highlights.
I would love that.
I would too. I think for communication, as we talk about this process,
Sure.
I would like to be upfront with our residents that this is what we're cutting. And these are what the services that we're going to be cutting. You know, you get, I would not expect the average resident to read through this whole book, right? I know you're
No.
going to put a nice summary, but since we're talking about it now, I'm having discussions with neighborhood groups that would, the longer we can have discussion, because the realization that there are consequences to our levy lift failing. Some of the questions I have are really more going to be about policy, so we can talk, you know, I mean, if we're making reductions like our vehicle replacement or building maintenance, I'd like that to come to light and be part of the list. I would like to tell my neighbors, yeah, our vehicles are not keeping up where they should be. They're not, it's not a proper, it's a reduction in our fleet management system. It's just not something that you see right away, right? They're delayed. Same with their building maintenance. I would like, if we could be part of that list, I think it's really important to show all of us, you know, an itemized bullet list of this is what we're cutting and this is the services. And you could even have it divided up in immediate and then long-term effects, right? I think that'd be a helpful tool for us as we communicate with our neighbors. Also, I had a question, and maybe I didn't find it, but about Fund 170. Do we have a policy on the rainy day fund? And how we use it? What do we determine?
So with the rainy day fund, we did use it as a balancing measure for the
Yeah.
2024 budget. And it has been previously used to help balance. In past years, we haven't had the need to actually make the transfer, but that is part of the balancing measure list, if you will, if it were to be used. But generally,
Yeah, and I think that's more of a policy question. I don't think
Sure.
for budget purposes now. I would like to bring that in our council retreat, is revisit our finance policy and include that in how, just the criteria and when we spend it, so, yeah. Anyway,
And
so
that is
thank you for that.
Fund 160,
One what?
160.
Oh, I thought it was 170. I know that, oh, yeah, 160, I apologize, yeah, thank you. I knew it was a 1 and a 0, how's that? Yeah. Councilmember Fosse.
In reference to that, are we going to have a time where we are able to talk as council about some of the recommendations, long-term ones, not immediate short-term for the budget that we received from our consultant?
Well, I think actually, this time now would be actually a good time if you wanted to.
It seems like it's a longer conversation itself because it talks about, like, some of his suggestions about the organization of how the budget is divided out, in the general funds,
Right.
having, you know, that, it seems like it could be better, like, then that's just one of his suggestions on how
Sure.
it's divided up for, you know, a better read, I guess.
So my intention was to invite Mike Bailey to our council retreat and have a section on policy
Great, okay.
and how, going forward. I mean, at this point, you know,
That's what I'm thinking,
Yeah, yeah.
long-term stuff, if we're planning on doing that at the retreat, then,
yeah.
okay.
Because at this point, we need to go through this process. And of course, we're delayed a bit because we were optimistic that perhaps we'd have more revenue. But going forward, things are going to get tighter, so we definitely need to revisit that. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Councilmember Tui.
Yeah, I have a question for Heidi. On page 3-3, the four-year comparison, I was just looking at, and you can explain why the ending fund balances don't match up with the beginning fund balances?
does this one work? Yes, so the 2024 amended ending fund balance doesn't incorporate the budget variance. So if you take the 24 ending balance, and then you add $7,014,685, which is the budget variance from 2023, then that would get you to the $38.5 million that we have in the beginning fund balance for '25.
You know, for me, it would be great to have a line up at the top, that beginning fund balance and then the budget variance, you know, so that we can see exactly, and then it matches up with that number. That would be
No, that's really
very
good
helpful.
feedback, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Any other? Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you. For some of the non-departmental funds, I have questions about some of the memberships that we have and what are we getting for some of the memberships, and also like which ones are statutorily required for different types of funding. And then on a quick review, I'm not sure, I guess I can ask that one later, but I think that would be helpful to know, you know, which of these programs we have to belong to and which ones maybe we don't need to belong to anymore. And then had another question, and I'm spacing out on it.
Councilmember Ryan, are the memberships, because those are in non-departmental 009, is that what you meant to say? Is it-
Non-departmental General Government Department 009. I had another question, I'm blanking on it, I'll think of it sometime.
Councilmember Vogely.
I might have already answered this myself, but now I'm seeing it again. So 2-12, Department and Fund Relationships. We have like 44 funds, but only 37 are displayed here. So like the rainy day fund isn't in the table. The affordable housing and supportive housing fund isn't, and then also the capital project fund. So I'm guessing, could you explain how page 212, department and fund relationships, how that page works a little bit, and why some funds aren't in it?
The capital projects funds are not what we consider to be the operating funds. So that, the budget for those gets approved through council's approval of the plans and systems ordinances. So if it's using, let's say, real estate excise tax dollars, which is in Fund 162, a true operating, then that provides us with the authority to utilize those resources for those capital projects that are in the 300 level funds.
Okay.
The construction projects.
Yeah.
160 you said was not in?
Yeah, and that's
That's
rainy
fine.
day, so I imagine that's
That's more of a
sort of
policy.
self-explanatory. And then 171, so that's, it sounds like the ones that aren't, and 508, and I can't remember what 508 is right now. Health Benefits Reserve.
I believe this one is more of the department and fund relationships. There's no one department that is overseeing the rainy day fund.
Okay, yeah, that all makes sense. Just curious. Thanks.
Any other questions at this time? Councilmember Tui.
Trying to get them all done. So Heidi, on the vacancy allowance, does that include the furloughs that are going to happen? Or the reduction in hours is part of that?
Are you talking about the vacancy offset or the labor
Yeah.
contingency
Yeah.
in non-departmental 009?
Yeah.
Yes, that truly just represents the vacancy offsets, which we haven't changed the number of vacancies that we expect for 2025. It's still the same as what we had landed on in '24, which is 40 positions. However, you will see, it's a decrease because it's a negative number, but it's actually increasing the vacancy offset or increasing that negative amount. And that's due to natural progressions and increases to salaries. So that is the change. There's also a $200,000 contingency embedded in the labor contingency line, and that is for potential market rate adjustments. The city has been working with our labor unions. There are a few unsettled contracts, so that is really just to provide a buffer should there be any market rate adjustments through the settlements of those collective bargaining agreements.
Okay, so we're planning on the same amount of positions this year, 2025, as 2024. So even with all of the separations that we did and the positions that we're dropping, you still feel we're going to do the 40 positions throughout the year?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
evaluated during the budget development process, in
Okay.
addition to considering the positions that have been reduced.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Which
Councilmember
one?
Ryan. We'll just come down the list. We'll go this way.
I remembered my question.
Okay.
During the presentation, if you could please highlight where the opioid settlement dollars are being applied, that would be helpful for revenue purposes.
Sure.
Thanks.
And that will be on the November 13th presentation, when we'll go over the non-general government funds on a fund-by-fund basis.
Okay. Councilmember Vogely.
To go with Councilmember Tui's question, will we be getting a list of vacated positions for whatever reason they're vacated? Because now I can't remember all of the words that I'm supposed to know. But through the layoffs and the departures, however they departed, we had to take a lot of FTEs off. I think some of us have asked for that already, so I'm just asking again.
Sure. Yes. I believe the timing of when the voluntary separation incentive program was actually closed and finalized for applications just recently happened. So we're still gathering the information, solidifying which positions have actually taken the VSIP. But then that will be our starting list. And so we'll be able to update council on our starting point, and any changes that would be made would also be an update to council. Would it be in the monthly report?
Yeah, and that's,
we were gonna-
that's what I would wanted also was sort of itemized list. I'd like to know the reduction in services those cuts are going to create.
So two parts, I think that maybe that plus something else that helps answer Councilmember Vogely's question and yours, Council President Schwab. So the list of positions and the sort of results, I guess, of the VSIP program will be in your next and future monthly financial reports. We flagged that in the Council Digest this month. And it's not quite ready, but it will be in the next one, I think. And then you'll see, and you have the printed PowerPoint in front of you, but you'll see in tonight's full council meeting presentation, highlights of eliminated, changed, some reduced, some there are some additions too, for each department during that briefing tonight.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Okay, well, we're going to give everyone 5 minutes extra, and we'll conclude the Budget Committee, and we'll see you at our council meeting. Thank you.